The Trump administration said it will be engaging at every level of government to ban foreign adversaries from purchasing farmland in the U.S., most notably China, which has purchased an uncomfortable amount of land near strategic U.S. military bases and installations. It will also do everything possible to claw back land that has already been purchased. Not surprisingly, China is not happy, but many here in the United States are. With me now to talk about this is Congressman Greg Murphy, who has been actively involved in legislative efforts to address concerns about China's purchase of U.S. lands. He represents the 3rd Congressional District of North Carolina. Dr. Murphy, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having me.
And I know this is a topic you and I have talked about before on the program. This had to be music to your ears to hear the Department of Agriculture make this announcement.
Well, it was, Tony. You know, I live in a very rural part of eastern North Carolina, and we have a lot of farmland around with us. And so having it secure, having this something that we treasure to make sure that foreign hands and foreign entities are not taking advantage of our goodwill is going to be critical, really, not only for so many things that we saw during the pandemic, but for national security also.
Because a lot of this land that they've been purchasing happens to be around vital military installations. I mean, is that just coincidence?
Well, you know, knowing how nefarious and malign the Communist Party of China is, you can't take anything for granted. You know, as was pointed out a few weeks ago, they tried to put in a fungus, push into a fungus into the country that would have been disastrous for crops. You know, I've said this many times, Tony, and I firmly believe it. I believe we are at war with China. It's not ballistically, but it's economically, it's agriculturally, it's via trade. It is every other way that China is trying to get into this nation somehow and gain a foothold. If they're able to, control our food supply, then all bets are off. This is what we need more than anything, food and energy, obviously. But it's great for the Trump administration to put the hammer down and not allow it, and actually try to reclaim some of the land that has been taken up by Chinese foreign nationals already.
Dr. Murphy, you talked about the fungus that they tried to sneak into the country. I mean, when you consider, and you were on the program many times during the COVID pandemic, what that did to the world by releasing that virus there in China. I mean, if they were able to do something here and release it into our country that would destroy our crops or affect our food supply, I mean, this is what they have. I mean, given, as you said, the nefarious actions they've taken in the past, this is what I think we need to be protecting against.
Absolutely. You know, there's one thing we live, as Lincoln said, we're only going to end up taking over ourselves because we're protected by 2 oceans. But if they're able to sneak in biological agents, we saw this with COVID. And, I don't think there's any doubt now in the scientific community, if there are a few quadrants that are still trying to say that this came out of nature, but everybody else believes it was made in that lab. Whether it was made, actually, there are a few people who think it was made in the U.S. and transported there. That's a whole different story, a different show. But it leaked in that lab. Was it done on purpose? I doubt it. But this just goes to show you how one small incident can lead to worldwide disaster. You bring in something that kills our crops, it's essentially Armageddon for us. We can't feed ourselves, much less the rest of the world.
And we're talking about 45 million acres of American agriculture land that is being held by foreign entities. Now, when you look at collectively of all the agricultural land we have in this country, about 3.5% is of all privately held agricultural land is in the hands of foreign nationals. But when you look at the Communist Party of China, or I know they have these shell companies, so they have layers in between them, but we know who actually is behind it. Right. How much farmland does Americans own in China?
Well, I'd love to say probably about 0, Tony. I don't know that for a fact, but I can't see that the Chinese Communist Party would allow us to own any land over there. And so having other countries, China actually doesn't own the most land, in my understanding. We have some other countries that own more land, but they don't want to see our destruction. So, no, I don't believe we own anything in China. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't see the Communist Party allowing us to do anything in their country.
They don't even let their own people own the land, let alone let Americans own the land.
Yeah.
So what's this look like? I was interested in, and you made reference to this, the clawing back of the property already purchased. Again, a lot of this around strategic military installations. Sure. What does that process look like?
You know, it's interesting you say that because I think it was probably about 3 years ago. I have 3 military bases in my district, all Marine bases: Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point, which is the fixed wing for the Marines, and Rotor Wing is New River Air Station. We had 2 Chinese nationals of all places that were trying to buy land outside Cherry Point, the fixed wing installation. That got kiboshed very quickly, fortunately. But you don't know how much has gone on otherwise around strategic lands. And now that you don't need landing fields, you essentially need an acre of land or so to have a drone take off. It's an entirely different calculus. It's an entirely different game about how much damage they can do to this country.
That's a really good point, considering what we've seen Ukraine do to Russia, and how they've been able to really turn the tables on Russia by utilizing modern technology of drones. You know, this is a good example of, from my perspective, you feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but there's, I think, 23 states that have already taken action to restrict China from purchasing farmland in their states. You know, the states were far ahead of the federal government. It takes the federal government a long time to catch up on these things. This is why. This is a good example of why our system, our federalist system, works well, because states are quicker to act, and eventually the federal government catches up.
Right. North Carolina has done it, which is a good thing, considering how agriculture is still our number one economy. And we have so many military bases also in North Carolina. It was critical that we protect those. You know, you go back and you look at what's being done nationally versus statewise. You know, we had pushbacks from the other side of the aisle that we were being xenophobic or some other, slur one way or the other. No, it's called national security. It's about protecting our homeland. You know, I think you and I have talked also about the Chinese malign influence, on college campuses. It's no different. They are trying everything they can to get in on every sector of our society, be it at the educational system, the agricultural system, around our military, our security system, our economy. They're trying every way possible to destabilize this nation. And I, for one, am extremely glad, really breathing a sigh of relief that we have an administration that actually cares about that, understands about that, and is not worried about some nonsense social justice parameter, really to do the right thing.
I think this is a prime example of America First policy, that we're going to protect the American people and we're going to protect American interests first and foremost.
Right, right. You know, we saw that during the pandemic, and I think that's such a lesson for us. We were careening towards an oblivion of just ignorance. The world is fine. It's been 80 plus years since we had a world war. Everything's going to be fine because people are nicer to one another now. That's not true. Sadly enough, we still live in a world where sin creates evil, and evil creates sin. And we live in a country that has been isolated, and we think nothing would ever happen to us. But remember, hard times create easy men, and easy men create soft times. And that's what we're facing right now. And it's great that we have an administration that actually recognizes that we have to be concerned about security. We have to be concerned about those things that are in part of guaranteeing our freedom and well-being.
Well, and back to the issue of just how China is taking every avenue they can to undermine the United States and what we stand for. Yesterday, I was on Capitol Hill speaking on a panel on China with Bob Fu with China Aid regarding religious persecution in China, which, by the way, I think should be a part of every conversation we have with China in regards to trade. Any diplomatic conversations ought to include religious persecution and human rights. But that wasn't my point. Right after I left, there was a CCP kind of agent that disrupted the event and started an altercation with one of the panelists there. They are bold in our face. They are not hesitant at all to advocate for their intimidation tactics that they take toward Chinese nationals who have come legally to this country.
Sure. Because it's the secret sauce. It's their secret sauce. Keep everybody within the confines of the Chinese Communist Party, as far as the theology, if you will, of what they think and believe. You try doing it for an American being over in China and disrupting something. They go away to a prison for a very long time. So they're taking advantage of our free society. And we're not going to give up our freedom because of those risks. But it's really true, Tony. They don't care. They're taking advantage of the United States in so many different regards because of the free society in which we live. And it's great that we have an administration that understands with that freedom comes the cost that we have to make sure that we have security.
Right.
Without that, we don't have our own freedom.
But also understanding that it's okay to target those who are the threat and not everybody. I mean, that's how we have to approach this. We don't need to take away everyone's freedom. We just need to take away those who are here to do bad things and undermine America. Dr. Murphy, we're out of time, but always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony. God bless. Have a great rest of the week.